Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Hello, Karen.
Hey, Dan.
We got a guest today. Hello, Erica.
Hello.
So today with us, we have Erica Lyon. She's the Ag and Natural Resources Educator in both Harrison and Jefferson County. Right above me, just to the northwest of Karen, another Ohio Valley educator slash ag agent in the area.
And Erica is especially important to us because she has taken our show and built it into a newsletter. And so if you are in the Ohio Valley or the upper Ohio Valley, and you are interested in upcoming programs and information that is relevant to this specific area, please reach out to us and we'll get you signed up for the newsletter. So that way you know what's going on.
Yeah, we had a nice time over at the Ohio County Fair. Both Eric and I were there. Got to meet a lot of people on the east side of the Ohio River. It was good. It was a nice fair, and we were trying to promote the show over there, get people acquainted with Extension Calling. And if you're new to the show, welcome.
That's right.
Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling.
All right, so we thought that with the wrapping up of October and the approach of Halloween, that it would be fun to do a show on zombies.
Okay, I got it out of my system.
I'm so scared. Yeah, another scary topic for the Halloween season.
That's right.
And it's ag related. People think that zombies are fake, but there's a role for them in nature.
That's right.
That's really scary.
So one of the more famous situations of fungi and insect interactions is with a fungus called cordiceps unilateralis. So it's actually a tropical fungus that infects carpenter ants, primarily located in the Thailand area. But what's interesting about this is the fungus tends to attack the brain of these ants, resulting in some very odd behaviors. The ants pretty much live and die, so the fungus can survive, thrive, and reproduce. And under the influence of the fungus, these zombie ants will leave their nests at abnormal times relative to the typical behavior that you would normally see with these ants.
Fungi is its own kingdom. We're talking about all the major kingdoms of life, and we have fungi, we have animals, we have plants, we have Monera, and Protista. But fungi don't have a nervous system. They are multicellular.
Usually multicellular. There's the yeast that are single-celled.
Thank you. And I should have known that. I should have known that one. But they don't have a nervous system. A lot of people think they're similar to plants, but actually, as far as classification and cellular metabolism, they're more similar to animals than they are plants, even though they might resemble plants a little bit. They don't photosynthesize, and they're not autotrophic, so they can't make their own food. So they do have to consume carbon, and a lot of times they can be parasitic.
Yeah, they They tend to be an odd group of organisms, and usually with your fungi, they're interacting with all the different kingdoms that are out there. Today, we're going to be focusing on the interaction between fungi and insects, but really there's so much that they do in nature. There's quite a few interactions that we have with them in this position. Frequently, I'm talking about the interactions between fungi and plants.
Yeah, in fact, I'm a big fan of the association between fungi and pizza. Okay, but a little bit different now. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, we're now going to talk about why do we call this interaction between this fungus and these ants a zombie interaction. So really what the fungus does is it eventually starts to replace the tissues in that insect's brain. It causes their movement to become more random. Usually, if you've ever observed ants, they tend to walk in straight lines. They usually have defined paths to and from their colony.
But for the most part, right? We're talking about these specialized roles in fungi and insects, in particular with the zombie show. But generally speaking, right, the fungi kingdom, it's generally decomposers, right? So they would just feed off of dead animals and plants.
Yeah, a vast majority of your fungi are going to be what we call saprobes. That is, they're breaking down organic matter in some form. Now, some of those saprobes can be slightly parasitic in nature. They might be more opportunist. So let's say a tree's in decline, they take advantage of the situation, finish killing off the tree, and then will essentially feed off of its corpse.
Yeah.
And I guess athlete's foot would be another example of a parasitic fungus.
Yeah, ringworm, those are common ones that you encounter with humans, but really, like, we have fungi. Our skin is coated in fungi already.
Oh, yeah. Bacteria, too.
Oh, yeah. What they do is a lot of times they will compete with some of our pathogenic organisms. So they can serve as a potential defense for us in preventing disease.
As long as they don't make us zombies.
Yeah, that's highly unlikely.
Right. So just so you all out there know that if any of you were big fans of The Last of Us, we want you to know that there is not a way that the cordyceps fungus will infect a human being because we're too warm for that fungi to reproduce in our own systems. So it's not going to happen. Don't panic. But typically, cordyceps and fungi in general actually a pretty good thing to have around.
Yeah, they have a variety of uses, and they're being researched quite a bit for their pharmaceutical value as well as their use as biological controls. A lot of these types of fungi, they belong to a group of fungi called the entomopathogenic fungi, and that is they are insect pathogenic fungi. So you'll see a lot of them attack some of our common pests that we have in a lot of the fields that we work in.
Including the spotted lanternfly.
Yes, that's true.
Which is pretty exciting news.
Oh yeah, and there's some common species of fungi that you can readily find available online or in some garden centers. Bovaria bassiana is a classic species that's used for some types of insect control.
Yeah. So tell us more about the ants and what happens when they get infected with this fungus.
So essentially, I mentioned earlier, their brain material is eventually replaced by the fungal mycelium, or the tissue of the fungus itself. You'll notice that these ants, their movement becomes more random compared to ants that are moving to and from their colony, and they tend to convulse. Sound familiar? Following this behavior, those ants, what's interesting is they will climb up on the northern side, specifically the northern side of the plant, to approximately 25 centimeters above the ground. And that's pretty much standard with these infections. The spot tends to be cooler and moister compared to other levels, so that's why a lot of folks who are researching this believe that fungus wants to be in that specific spot. These ants will then bite into the vein. after which, this is where it gets a little graphic, folks. Essentially, the muscles in their mandibles will begin to deteriorate. This causes them a lockjaw effect where they essentially become cemented in place to that plant. Now, the ant is not dead yet. It's going to hang on there for several hours, kicking and twitching for a little while. When this happens, when the deterioration of the mandible starts, generally at this point, the brain matter is about 50-50. It's 50% the original brain of the ant and 50% just fungus. By the time the ant dies, about 75% of the brain will be just fungal tissue. So it's kind of gruesome, not a fun way to go. So after the ant's dead a few hours, you will start to see this structure emerge from the head, and the structure is the primary feature that will produce the spores. So these spores will then get dispersed and happen among the next unsuspecting victim.
And it's very specific to ants, right? So if I breathe the stuff in, I'm okay.
Yeah, a lot of these fungi have very specialized relationships with their hosts. This particular species will only attack this tropical species of carpenter ant. So you're not going to generally see these big jumps from one organism to another, and that's why don't expect humans to become zombies anytime soon.
At least not through fungus, or this fungus in particular. No. It's always fascinated me how, we talk about the different kingdoms that are out there. And, we talk about disease and, pathogen and host relationships and how specific they are. And it can be scary if you overthink it. In general, diseases jumping from one species to another, it can happen. We typically, I think, see it a lot more with viruses than we do with fungus and bacteria, because viruses just mutate so quickly. I know it's not exactly what we're talking about, but most of the time we talk about a viral disease in plants, and some people are worried that they're going to get sick if they eat it, a plant virus, and it doesn't really transmit to people. But something that will overtake the nervous system of an ant. It's just such a specific relationship, and it's just amazing that something that specific can evolve as life develops and
right.
cause it to move. Probably right. It moves to a higher ground. Is that right, Erica?
Yeah, it just moves higher up on the plant.
So then it can feed off the dead ant and then produce more spores, and the spores can get carried probably by the wind, right, to other suspecting ants in that area.
Yeah, they spread a variety of ways. Wind is the primary one, but if it's raining, water can carry the spores. But also, if you think about it, these fungi are not the only ones feeding on this ant corpse. There's other arthropods that will also do that as well. So if you think about it, you got other insects that are coming and moving pieces of this ant around that's infected, and you're going to carry some of that inoculum or disease-causing material to other areas. And it's interesting in that a lot of times in this particular case, this fungus has been known to completely wipe out entire colonies of these tropical carpenter ants. They leave behind it essentially a graveyard of these corpses. So a little scary and nerve-wracking when you encounter this fungus, but just as a general reminder, this is happening in a different part of the world. We have a similar association going on with a cordyceps species in Ohio. There's one that will parasitize the pupal and larval stages of certain lepidopterans, or your moths and butterflies. And usually this particular one is associated with silkworm larvae. So there are different variations of this association or this relationship in other species as well.
Right. And you were talking about that it spreads through the wind or the other insects coming up around it and feeding on the ant and whatnot. But when you look at Massospora cicadina, this fungus actually targets emerging cicadas, and basically it eats away at their abdomen and their rear end. And so then they're covered with this clump of spores, right? And then they will fly around and spread this fungus to as many other cicadas as they can. The fungus makes them a little, what shall we say?
Zombie like.
Well, yeah, so it takes over the insect, and instead of being able to breed, they just try to breed rapidly with everything. And so they kind of go a little nuts there. But again, that's an interesting fungal insect connection that isn't going to spread to people.
Well, I don't even want to run into that cicada then.
And even that particular species and that association with the cicada is actually pretty rare even among the entomopathogenic fungi, because usually by the time these fungi are sporulating, their host is dead. Now, there are a few cases where they will sporulate while the host is still alive, but that is, yeah, very rare.
But you know what? We as people in the agricultural sector have utilized some of these organisms as like a fungi-based insecticide. There are some products out there that actually are insecticides that are fungal based. Maybe it's not the association we're talking about here, but
No, you're absolutely right, Dan. There are some fungi out there that are commonly sold, and it's actually a very tricky process to get to the point where you can commercially market these fungi. You've got to pick ones that have a particularly virulent strain to be the most effective. And you've got to pick ones that are generally easy and cost effective to grow or cultivate in a lab. Some of your classic ones that you'll find available, I already talked about Bovaria bassiana, but there's also Metarhizium, cordyceps, and then Acanthamyces that you can find.
and these are called myco-insecticides, right? Myco meaning the root fruit fungus, insecticides meaning dead insects.
Yeah, they're sold, like if you search biological controls for insects, they're one of the first things to pop up. But yeah, they go under a variety of different names.
Yeah, and the thing that you would think would be fungally related would be milky spore, but that's actually a bacteria. So it's like nothing is named appropriately for some reason.
Yeah, and there's some fungi out there that will mimic bacterial properties as well. There's actually one of the toxins produced in some of these relationships is similar to the cholera bacteria. So there's been some work being done on that and how that pertains to human health. But the use of biological controls for insect control, that actually, we've been doing that for a couple centuries now. That dates back to the 1800s. But it hasn't taken off like our synthetic pesticides have, because usually it takes some time to build up that fungal population to where it's enough that it's going to start taking down that insect population.
Right. So basically, these fungal relationships with the zombie ants have been going on for a long, long time. There was an article in the Smithsonian. They found a fossil that showed a 48 million year old leaf with these infected fungal ants on it. So it's just really crazy to think how long these relationships have been going on, and that just a fungus can have the ability to get into this bug's brain and make it do its bidding. It's just really crazy to think about the complexity of a fungus to be able to do this. You know, we don't think about fungi as being very complex, but they really are. And there's a lot we don't know about them yet.
And that's a great point, Karen. One of the things that you sometimes will encounter is like cordyceps is sometimes used as a medicinal mushroom. And they frequently harvest these fungi in Tibet or in different parts of China. And they found that there's actually some over-harvesting that's been going on. So there's a delicate balance. Like, we want to make sure that we're not completely eradicating these fungal populations.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much we still have to learn. I mean, we have really come leaps and bounds on our informational journey, but there is still so much to learn. Relationships that we don't really understand yet. Think about the role of fungi in helping trees to communicate with one another to ward off insects and potential dangers.
Yeah, especially on the pharmaceuticals, like with medicinal species, and this pertains to a lot of different fungi as well. You'll sometimes encounter claims of, oh, this fungus will cure cancer. We have to manage our expectations. Typically, when you see these claims, they're based off of one study that might not necessarily have had replication.
Mm-hmm.
Some studies will counter with a negative result. So there, like you said, Karen, there's a lot we don't know, and it'll be a while until we can tease apart those interactions.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a very complicated kingdom. But as far as human uses, I think, and I could be completely wrong here, so let's bear with me for a second. But as far as human uses for fungus, I would say that yeast has probably played the biggest role in human interactions. Well, not human interactions, but
You're just thinking about beer, aren't you, Dan?
Yeah.
I was thinking about the fermentation process, and how, unlike a lot of the roles of fungus that we're talking about being a direct thing, in this case, when we ferment fruits and sugars, it's the byproduct from that reaction that we utilize, which would be the ethanol. But we use fungus in so many different ways, and apparently fungi can use animals in a way that is terrifying.
So are you saying like we're going to have zombified humans out there?
No, I was trying to get the complexity of the fungal kingdom. Karen was talking about all the mycorrhizal associations underground, right? And I remember in college, they used to say that the largest organism is a mycorrhizal association.
It's actually a parasitic association. The one you're thinking of is Armillaria, which is related to the honey mushroom. And there's a specimen out in Oregon that's about 2 kilometers, I believe, in diameter. But what it's doing is it's parasitizing a bunch of trees in that area. So your Armillaria species will produce these thick, black, ropey-like structures that wrap around the trees. And that's essentially what they're measuring out there to determine its mass.
Right. And they're calling out one organism. So it's like the largest one organism in the world at this point.
I believe you're correct.
Am I making this up?
No, you're not.
I need some feedback here from the experts. Okay.
Yeah, and it's really crazy. When you go out in the woods and you're looking for timber or you're just looking at trees in general, you can tell if armillaria was the cause of death for this tree because as the bark flakes off, you'll see those black shoestring like leftover mycelium on the wood of the tree, and it hides underneath the bark. Remember, under the bark is that living tissue layer that has all the yummy stuff. And so that's where it likes to go.
Man, so like these mushrooms are killing everything. It's just, again, terrifying.
Well, here's another wrench into this story. So there's a parasite of the Armillaria fungus. Its common name is aborted entoloma. And when it's not parasitizing the honey mushroom, it looks pretty generic. It produces a brown, essentially fairly generic mushroom. But what's interesting is when it finds some Armillaria mycelium, it will start to produce these interesting structures that just look like white blobs. And this is actually known as shrimp of the woods.
Shrimp of the woods. I haven't had that one.
People like to harvest it and fry it to eat.
That's amazing.
So you got a really complex relationship going on there where you have a parasite of a parasite.
Yeah, and chicken of the woods, mix them up together, right?
As with everything, it's good fried.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, you can have like a fungal tree relationship. But chicken of the wood is a decomposer.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a weak pathogen, but primarily a decomposer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll find that on a lot of dead wood, I would say.
Yeah, or trees that are in the process of dying.
So as Karen would say, trees that don't know they're dead yet.
Yes.
Yeah, that one's a classic, Karen. That one's a good one. The tree doesn't know it's dead, and it might struggle for years without knowing that it's dead.
So in a nutshell, you're saying it's a zombie tree.
That was terrifying stuff here. I don't want to walk in the woods and next to all these zombie trees. And now I know there's zombie ants out there too. So I don't know. That's a scary world.
There's zombie ants, there's zombie flies, there's zombie moths, zombie fungi.
So I do want to touch back on one thing that Dan was mentioning earlier. He talked about yeast, right? And I just wanted to make sure that our listeners are clear in the fact that the yeast that we use for bread and beer is not the same yeast that causes skin infections. So the skin infection yeast is Canidia albicans, and that's mostly connected with thrush. But when you're looking at your baking yeast, you're looking at Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So you're looking at saccharose means sugar and cerevisiaism means beer, right? So this is the sugar-eating beer fungi. It's fun when you look at those Latin name connections because they're pretty spot on.
In this case, this is the funnest of the fungi, right? That one generally terrifies less people.
Those jokes are terrifying.
Welcome to our show.
Yeah. And the leaves are changing and it's getting darker. And now we're talking about all these zombies that can come out from all these associations. Yeah, October is a scary time.
That's so true.
And we also always want to point out that safety factor when we talk about mushrooms. Do not eat a mushroom unless you absolutely are positive as to what it is, because there are a lot of lookalike mushrooms that are poisonous. And if you don't know what it is, then don't eat it. And the old saying is there are old mushroom hunters and there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old, bold mushroom hunters.
But there can be zombie mushroom hunters.
No, there can't.
No, yeah, that's right. We just did an entire show talking about how it's not possible, but in other insects, it is.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you're talking about mushroom hunters as insects, then yeah, there's zombies of those.
See, terrifying.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.